Hello, my friend. Today, you are going to learn English by doing something that most language teachers never teach you, by learning how to think. Because here is the truth that changed everything for me. The truth that took me years of cold mornings and broken conversations and embarrassing mistakes to finally understand. The biggest barrier between you and fluent English is not your vocabulary. It is not your pronunciation. It is not even your grammar. It is the language you are thinking in right now. It is the fact that when you want to say something in English, you first form the thought in your native language. Then you search for the translation. Then you try to assemble the English sentence. And by the time you have done all of that, the moment has passed. The conversation has moved on. And you are left behind, holding a perfectly constructed English sentence that nobody needed 3 seconds ago. Today, we are going to talk about how to change that. How to begin thinking in English. How to move from translating to actually living inside the language. And as we do this together, you will learn real English. Natural, useful, deeply human English that you can start using immediately. Let me ask you something first. When you dream, what language do you dream in? When you are angry, truly angry, the kind of angry where you forget to be careful about what you say, what language comes out? When you are laughing so hard that words come without thinking, what language are those words in? For most people who are learning English, the answers to all three of these questions are the same. Their native language. The language they were born into. The language that lives so deep inside them that it operates without permission, without effort, without thought. And this is completely natural. This is how the brain works. The language you learned first is wired into the deepest parts of your mind. It is not just a communication tool. It is the architecture of your thinking. It is the framework through which you understand the world. But here is what is also true. That architecture can be rebuilt, not destroyed. Your native language is a gift. And a person who speaks 2 languages has something that a person who speaks only one can never fully appreciate, but expand it, extend it. Over time, with the right kind of practice, the English language can move from the surface of your mind where you have to consciously reach for it to a deeper place. A place where it begins to feel automatic, where thoughts form in English before they have the chance to form in anything else, where you stop translating and start simply speaking. I know this is possible because I lived it, and today I am going to tell you exactly how it happens. I want you to think back to when you were a very small child, not in your own memory, because we rarely remember being that young, but in your imagination. Picture a child of 2 or 3 years old sitting on the floor, looking at the world around them. That child does not know what a dictionary is. That child has never studied grammar. That child has never sat in a classroom and been told that a noun is a person, place, or thing. And yet that child is learning language at a speed that no adult learner ever matches. They are absorbing words, structures, rhythms, and patterns at a rate that scientists still do not fully understand. How? Not by studying, by living, by hearing language constantly in context connected to real things and real feelings and real people, by making sounds and getting responses, by trying words and seeing what happens, by failing and trying again with no shame, because at that age, nobody has yet told them that making a mistake is something to be afraid of. This is the model. This is the secret that is hiding in plain sight. The child does not think about the language. The child thinks through the language. The language is not the object of attention. The world is the object of attention. And language is simply the tool the child reaches for to engage with that world. And what we are trying to do as adult English learners is recover something of that relationship. Not to become children again. We have knowledge and experience and metacognitive abilities that children do not have, and those things are genuine advantages. But to begin treating English less like a subject we are studying and more like a medium we are living inside. So what does that actually look like in practice? Let me start with something very small, because the small things are where everything begins. Start narrating your life in English. Right now, today, wherever you are, if you are sitting at a table, say to yourself, I am sitting at a table. The table is brown. There is a cup on the table. The cup is half empty. Outside the window, I can see the street. A car just passed. The sun is low in the sky. This sounds almost too simple to be useful. I understand why you might think that. But I want you to trust me on this, because this practice is doing something very important. It is building the habit of reaching for English first, before your native language, before the translation. You are training your brain to respond to the immediate world around you directly in English, and this is the foundation of everything that comes after. When I was learning English from tourists at the hotel, I did not have hours every day to sit and study. I had a bicycle ride in the morning, a few hours of conversation when I was lucky, and then a full day of other responsibilities. But I used every moment. Walking between buildings, I would describe what I saw in English inside my head. Eating, I would name the food in English. Feeling tired at the end of the day, I would say to myself, in English, I am exhausted. What a long day. I need to sleep. These were tiny, private moments that nobody saw and nobody measured. But they were the moments that built the foundation. They were the moments when English began to move from being something I performed in front of others to something I inhabited alone, quietly, in the ordinary spaces of an ordinary day. The next thing I want you to understand is the difference between knowing a word and owning a word. This distinction is one of the most important things I can share with you about thinking in English. When you know a word, you can recognize it when you see it or hear it. You can look it up in a dictionary. You can match it to its translation in your native language. Knowing a word is a passive relationship. The word exists somewhere in your memory and you can retrieve it when needed, but it does not come to you. You have to go to it. Owning a word is completely different. When you own a word, it comes to you. It arrives in your mind spontaneously, in the middle of a thought, connected to a feeling or an image or a situation, without you having to search for it. Owned words are the ones you think in. Known words are the ones you translate into. The path from knowing to owning is not mysterious. It is repetition in context. It is encountering the same word in many different situations, many different sentences, many different emotional registers, until the word stops being a symbol you decode and becomes a unit of thought you simply use. This is why reading matters so much. This is why listening matters so much. Not just to expose yourself to new words, but to encounter familiar words again and again in new contexts, deepening your relationship with them each time until they are no longer foreign visitors in your mind, but permanent residents. Let me give you a specific example using a word that English learners often know but rarely own. The word is overwhelmed. Most intermediate English learners know this word. They can tell you it means a feeling of having too much to deal with. They can recognize it in a sentence. But when they are speaking and they feel that feeling, the feeling of too much, of everything at once, of not knowing which way to turn, they reach for their native language, not for the word overwhelmed, because overwhelmed has not yet moved from known to owned. To own the word overwhelmed, you need to encounter it in emotional context repeatedly. You need to hear someone say, I was completely overwhelmed when I got the news, and feel the weight of what they mean. You need to read about a person standing in a new city for the first time, overwhelmed by the noise and the people and the strangeness of everything. You need to say it yourself, out loud, in a moment that is real. I am feeling a little overwhelmed right now, and feel the word fit the feeling like a key fits a lock. That is ownership. And ownership is what thinking in English requires. Now I want to talk about something that most people do not realize is connected to thinking in English, which is the way emotions are expressed differently in different languages. Every language has words that do not translate perfectly. Every language has ways of framing feelings and experiences that carry cultural meaning beyond the literal definition. And when you are thinking in English, you are not just using different words, you are sometimes moving into a slightly different emotional territory. English, for example, tends to be quite direct about feelings. Where some languages might express discomfort indirectly through metaphor or suggestion, English very often just says it. I am frustrated. I am disappointed. I feel like this is not working. This directness is something that learners from certain cultural backgrounds find surprising, sometimes uncomfortable. But learning to think in English means learning to be comfortable with this directness, to let yourself feel the feeling and name it in English without softening it too much, without translating it through the filters of another culture's emotional language. This is also, by the way, one of the reasons why learning English changes people in ways they do not always expect. When you spend enough time thinking in a new language, you begin to discover that the new language gives you access to parts of yourself that your native language does not reach as easily. Not because English is better. It is not better. It is different. But because any second language creates a kind of useful distance. It is slightly easier for many people to talk about difficult feelings in a second language than in a first. The emotional charge is slightly lower. The words carry less weight. And sometimes that lower weight is exactly what you need to say the thing you have been unable to say. This is a gift, an unexpected, strange, beautiful gift that language learning offers, and it is worth paying attention to. I want to spend some time now on something very practical, which is the internal monologue. Every person has an internal monologue, the voice inside your head that narrates your experience, comments on what is happening, worries about the future, replays the past, argues with people who are not in the room, makes observations about the world. For most people learning English, this internal monologue runs entirely in their native language. All day, every day, thousands of sentences, thousands of thoughts, all happening in a language that is not English. And then they sit down to speak English, and they wonder why it feels like putting on a coat that does not quite fit. The single most powerful thing you can do to begin thinking in English is to begin moving your internal monologue into English. Not all at once, not perfectly, but deliberately, bit by bit, conversation by conversation, day by day. When you wake up in the morning and you notice the light coming through the window, think in English, the morning light looks beautiful today. When you are waiting for something and you feel impatient, think in English, I hate waiting. This is taking so long. When something good happens and you feel happy, think in English. This is exactly what I needed. What a good moment. These thoughts do not need to be complicated. They do not need to demonstrate advanced vocabulary. They just need to happen in English. They just need to be the first language your mind reaches for, even in small, private, unimportant moments. Over time, something remarkable happens. The English internal monologue begins to influence the external English. Because the words and structures you are using privately in the silence of your own thinking are the same words and structures that will come out of your mouth when you need to speak. The internal is the rehearsal space for the external. And a person who has spent hours rehearsing English privately in the quiet of their own mind will speak English in public in a way that is fundamentally different from a person who only ever practices English when someone else is listening. There is also something I want to say about the role of emotions in language learning, because this is something I feel very strongly about. You will remember the English that you learned when you were feeling something. Full stop. The words you encountered in a moment of genuine emotion, excitement, sadness, surprise, laughter, anger, love. Those words will stay with you in a way that words encountered in a neutral, emotionless context will not. This is not a theory. This is how human memory works. The brain gives preferential treatment to information that was emotionally significant when it arrived. It marks it as important. It stores it more deeply. It retrieves it more quickly. This is why watching a film that genuinely moves you is one of the best ways to learn English. Not because you are studying the language, but because you are feeling it. The words in that film are connected to scenes that made you hold your breath, characters you cared about, moments that surprised you or broke your heart or made you laugh until you had to pause and breathe. Those words are no longer just symbols. They are memories. And memories are the closest thing the human brain has to permanent storage. This is also why telling stories matters so much in English learning. When you tell a story, a real story, something that actually happened to you, something you genuinely remember. You are using language connected to emotion. You are not performing English. You are recovering an experience and translating it in real time. And the emotion of the experience pulls the language forward in a way that pure translation never can. I noticed this in my own English journey. The conversations that built my language the fastest were not the ones where I was carefully constructing sentences. They were the ones where I was so engaged in what I was saying, so interested in the story I was telling, or the question I was asking, that I forgot to be careful. I forgot to monitor my grammar. I forgot to be afraid of mistakes. And in those moments of forgetting, the most natural English I had ever spoken came out of my mouth. Let me also talk about something that is closely related to thinking in English, which is dreaming in English. Many people treat dreaming in English as the ultimate sign of fluency, the proof that the language has truly entered the deep mind. And while dreaming in English is indeed a significant milestone, I want to offer you a more accessible and more immediately useful version of the same idea. Before you sleep at night, spend 5 minutes reviewing your day in English. Not writing it down necessarily, though writing is also useful, but thinking it through. What happened today? What was the best part? What was difficult? What did I learn? What do I want to do differently tomorrow? 5 minutes in English every night before sleep. The brain is remarkably receptive in those moments just before sleep. It consolidates the experiences of the day. And if the language of those final waking thoughts is English, the brain will work with that English during the night in ways that, over time, genuinely accelerate your fluency. I also want to address something that comes up for almost every English learner at some point, which is the feeling of losing yourself in a second language. Some people describe a discomfort with thinking in English that goes beyond just unfamiliarity. They feel that when they try to think in English, something of themselves gets lost. Their humor does not translate. Their personality feels flattened. The sharp, interesting, complex person they are in their native language becomes, in English, someone simpler, blunter, less fully themselves. I understand this feeling. I felt it myself in the early years. And I want to say 2 things about it. The first thing is that this feeling is temporary, but it is real, and it deserves to be taken seriously. In the early and middle stages of language learning, there is genuinely a gap between who you are inside and who you can express yourself to be in English. Your thoughts are complex, but your vocabulary is limited. Your humor is subtle, but the language is not yet precise enough to carry it. Your personality is rich, but the new language constrains it for now. This is one of the most frustrating and often under-acknowledged aspects of learning a language as an adult. You are not a beginner as a person, but the language makes you sound like one sometimes, and that is genuinely hard. The second thing I want to say is that this gap closes. It closes slowly, and it closes unevenly. Some parts of your personality will emerge in English earlier than others, but it closes. And on the other side of that closing, something fascinating happens. You discover that you have a self in English. Not a translation of your native language self, an English self. A version of you that has been shaped by the language, by the conversations, by the stories told and heard and felt in English. This English self is not more real or less real than the you that exists in your native language. It is simply another dimension, another way of being in the world. And the person who can inhabit multiple dimensions, who can be themselves fully in more than one language, has a richness of inner life that is genuinely rare and genuinely extraordinary. Now let me give you a set of very concrete daily practices, because everything I have said so far needs to land somewhere real. The first practice is what I call the 5-minute English morning. Before you pick up your phone, before you speak to anyone, before you do anything else, spend 5 minutes in your own mind in English. Think about what day it is. Think about how you feel. Think about one thing you want to do today and why it matters. 5 minutes every morning, starting tomorrow. The second practice is English labeling. Every object in your home has an English name. When you walk through your home and you see something, the window, the chair, the shelf, the light switch, the curtain, the mirror. Say its English name quietly to yourself. Not to memorize it. You probably already know it. But to build the reflex of seeing the world and reaching immediately for English as the language that names it. The third practice is English reactions. When something happens, something surprising, something funny, something frustrating, something wonderful, let your first internal reaction be in English. Oh, that is interesting. What a coincidence. I cannot believe that. That is so beautiful. I did not expect that. These reactions are tiny, but they are English happening. In your most spontaneous mental state, they are English without preparation. And that is exactly where fluency lives. The fourth practice is English questions. Every day, find something you are genuinely curious about and formulate the question in English, not to ask anyone necessarily, just to practice the shape of curiosity in English. Why does this work the way it does? What would happen if I tried a different approach? How do people in other countries think about this? Questions are some of the most cognitively engaging structures in any language, and practicing them privately builds flexibility and fluency in a way that statements alone cannot. The fifth practice is English storytelling. Once a week, not every day, once a week, tell yourself a story in English. A real story from your own life, something that happened, something you remember, something that mattered. Tell it from beginning to end, inside your mind, in English. Let yourself search for the words. Let yourself pause and rephrase. Let yourself discover what you can and cannot yet express. These moments of productive struggle, the moments where you are reaching for the English that is not quite there yet, are the moments of the most rapid growth. I want to close with something that I have been thinking about for many years. Something that has to do not just with English, but with what language is for. Language is not just a tool for transmitting information. Language is the medium in which we understand ourselves. The words we have available to us shape the thoughts we are able to think. The richer our language, in any language, the richer and more precise and more nuanced our inner life becomes. When you expand your English, you are not just adding a skill. You are expanding the territory of your own mind. You are giving yourself new ways to see the world, new ways to experience yourself, new ways to connect with other human beings across every possible boundary of geography and culture and history. I think about the boy I was, riding that bicycle in the dark every morning with no particular reason to believe that any of it would lead anywhere. I did not know what I was building. I did not have a plan. I had a desire, a genuine, urgent, almost physical desire to be able to speak with people I could not yet speak with, to understand things I could not yet understand, to belong to a wider world than the one I was born into. English was the door to that world. And thinking in English, not just speaking it occasionally, not just using it as a translation layer over my native language, but genuinely beginning to inhabit it, to live inside it, to let it shape my thinking. That was the moment the door actually opened. That door is available to you. It has always been available to you. It opens from the inside. And the key is not talent or intelligence or perfect grammar or a native accent. The key is the daily practice of reaching for English first, in the small moments, in the private moments, in the ordinary, unremarkable moments of an ordinary day when nobody is watching and nobody is grading you, and nobody will ever know whether you thought in English or did not. Those are the moments that matter most. Those are the moments that build the life. Start today, right now. Think one thought in English, one small, simple, completely imperfect thought. And then think another, and then another. That is how it begins. That is always, always how it begins. But I am not finished yet, because there is something else I want to give you before this episode ends. Something I have never heard another person talk about in the context of thinking in English, and yet something I believe is one of the most powerful forces available to any language learner. It is the power of imitation. Not copying, not pretending to be someone else, but the deep, deliberate, respectful practice of borrowing the way someone else thinks and speaks in English until that way becomes your own. Every great musician learns by imitating the musicians they admire. Every great writer begins by absorbing the writers who shaped them. Every great speaker found their voice by first spending time inside someone else's voice. This is not weakness. This is how mastery is built. You do not arrive at your own style by starting from nothing. You arrive at your own style by passing through the styles of others, taking what fits, leaving what does not, and eventually discovering that what remains is unmistakably, irreducibly you. So I want you to find a voice in English that you admire. It does not need to be a famous person. It does not need to be a politician or a CEO or a celebrity. It can be a podcaster whose rhythm you find beautiful, a teacher whose clarity you find remarkable, a friend who speaks English in a way that feels natural and warm and real. Find that voice, listen to it carefully, not just for what is being said, but for how it is being said. Notice the length of the sentences. Notice when the voice slows down and when it speeds up. Notice the words that appear again and again, the favorite words, the preferred phrases, the particular way this person frames an idea or begins a new thought. And then privately, in your own internal monologue, try on that voice. Borrow it. Wear it for a while. See how it fits. You will discover something interesting. Some parts of that borrowed voice will feel wrong immediately. Too formal for you, or too casual, or too confident, or not confident enough, or structured in a way that does not match how your mind naturally moves. And that feeling of wrongness is important information. It is your own voice pushing back. It is the beginning of knowing what you are not, which is always the beginning of discovering what you are. Other parts of the borrowed voice will feel surprisingly right. A particular phrase will click into place in a way you did not expect. A certain rhythm will feel like something you have been looking for without knowing you were looking. Hold on to those parts. Make them yours, because they were always going to be yours. You just needed to encounter them in someone else first. I want to talk now about something that happens to almost every person who reaches the intermediate level of English. Something that nobody warns you about and that can feel very discouraging when it arrives. It is called the plateau. The plateau is the stage where progress seems to stop, where you have been learning and growing and improving, and then one day you look around and realize that you have been at roughly the same level for weeks or months, and nothing seems to be changing. Your vocabulary is not noticeably expanding. Your speaking is not noticeably smoother. You are doing all the same things you were doing before, but the results have stopped coming. And the natural response to this feeling is to wonder whether you have reached your limit, whether this is as good as you are going to get. I want to tell you clearly and firmly that you have not reached your limit. The plateau is not a ceiling. It is a consolidation period. It is the time when your brain is quietly, invisibly organizing everything it has already learned, building deeper connections between words, reinforcing patterns, strengthening the neural pathways that carry English from your passive understanding into your active production. The plateau looks like nothing is happening. In reality, it is the stage where some of the most important work happens, precisely because it is below the surface, out of sight, where conscious effort cannot interfere with it. The way through the plateau is not to study harder, or practice more intensively, or push yourself with more urgency. The way through the plateau is to change the input. If you have been listening to podcasts, start reading more. If you have been reading, start watching. If you have been having conversations with the same 2 or 3 people, find new conversation partners who speak in different registers about different topics with different rhythms and accents and vocabularies. The brain needs novelty to grow. It needs to be surprised. It needs to encounter English in forms it has not encountered before, because each new form creates new connections, and new connections are what break the plateau and restart the growth. There is also something I want to say about the English that lives in music, because this is something that many language teachers dismiss. and I believe they are wrong to do so. Music is one of the most powerful vehicles for language learning that exists. Not because of the vocabulary, though lyrics often contain beautiful and unusual vocabulary. Not because of the grammar, though songs use grammatical structures in interesting and sometimes unconventional ways. But because of the melody, because the human brain is extraordinarily good at retaining information that is attached to music. We remember songs from decades ago with a precision that we cannot apply to anything else. We remember not just the words, but the exact pronunciation, the exact rhythm, the exact emotional color of every syllable. And when those words are in English, that precision, that depth of memory belongs to your English. Think about how many English words and phrases you already know from songs, even if you have never consciously studied them. Think about the idioms and expressions you picked up from lyrics without ever sitting down with a dictionary. This is language acquisition happening through joy, through pleasure, through the particular kind of attention that music commands. And it is entirely valid. In fact, I would argue that it is one of the most sustainable forms of English learning available, because it connects the language to something you love, and the things you love are the things you return to again and again without needing to be motivated or disciplined or reminded. So listen to English music deliberately, not just as background. Sit with a song. Read the lyrics while you listen. Notice the phrases that strike you. Notice the images that the words create. Notice how the language bends and stretches to fit the melody, how words are sometimes emphasized in unusual ways, how singers sometimes swallow consonants or stretch vowels in ways that reveal things about natural spoken English that no textbook ever shows you. Then sing along, badly if necessary, quietly if you prefer, but sing, because singing is one of the few activities where the mouth, the breath, the body, and the language are all engaged simultaneously. And that simultaneous engagement builds a physical relationship with English that speaking alone does not create. I also want to spend a moment on something that is easy to overlook but profoundly important, which is the quality of the silence between your English thoughts. When you are developing the habit of thinking in English, there will be many moments of silence, moments where you reach for a word or a phrase and it is not there yet. These moments can feel frustrating. They can feel like evidence that you are not good enough, not ready enough, not advanced enough. But I want you to reframe those moments completely. Every moment of reaching, every moment of genuine cognitive effort where you are trying to think something in English and the English is not fully there yet is a moment of growth. The brain is most receptive to new language in precisely those moments of productive struggle. The gap between what you want to express and what you can currently express is not a sign of failure. It is the space where new language enters. This is why I always tell people, do not be in a hurry to fill the gaps with your native language. When you are trying to think in English and you cannot find the English word, resist the urge to immediately substitute the word from your native language. Sit with the gap for a moment. Let your brain search. Let the silence exist. Sometimes the word will come. And when it comes after a genuine search, it will stay with you in a way it never would have if you had simply looked it up. The struggle itself is what makes the word yours. And finally, I want to bring everything we have talked about today back to something very simple and very human. The reason you are learning English, the real reason, underneath all the practical motivations, is connection. You want to reach people you cannot yet reach. You want to understand things you cannot yet understand. You want to participate in conversations that are currently happening in a language you are still learning to inhabit. This desire, this genuinely human desire to cross the distance between yourself and another person is the most powerful force in language learning. More powerful than any method or any app or any textbook or any teacher. When I stood outside that hotel every morning, afraid to walk through the door, what pulled me through was not discipline. It was not willpower. It was not a strategic plan for language acquisition. It was the image of the person on the other side of the door, the stranger with the camera and the map and the strange, beautiful language and the almost unbearable desire to know that person. to understand their world, to be understood by them in return. That desire was bigger than the fear. Every single morning, it was bigger than the fear. Find your version of that desire. Find the specific, concrete, personal reason why English matters to you, not in general, not in theory, but in your actual life, in your actual future, in the actual conversations you want to have and the actual people you want to reach. Hold that reason in your mind when the practice feels tedious, when the plateau arrives, when the anxiety rises, when the internal voice says this is too hard and you are too far behind and it will never come together the way you need it to. In those moments, come back to the desire. Come back to the person on the other side of the door. They are waiting. The language is waiting. And so is the version of you that already thinks in English, already dreams in English, already moves through the world with the full weight of who you are expressed in a language that belongs to everyone and to no one, and therefore completely and without reservation to you. Walk through the door. The door has always been open. It was only ever you who needed to be ready, and you are ready now